First Peter chapter 1 verses 13 through 16 say, "Therefore, preparing your minds for action, and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, 'You shall be holy, for I am holy.'" Hello and welcome to the Wicket Gate. My name is Benjamin, and last week we talked about God's holiness. We talked about how he created the world and how he's just so high above us. And I went through a lot of Bible verses that talk about how God is holy and how he's just so much above us. We can't really even comprehend it. But this week I wanted to talk a little bit about how we are supposed to respond to God's holiness. We have this majestic and powerful and awesome God, but these verses tell us that we're supposed to be holy like God. Verse 16 quotes from Leviticus when God tells the people of Israel to be holy because he is holy. In Genesis 3, we find the story of mankind rebelling against God and sinning and eating from the tree that God said, don't eat from it. And because of the choice that Adam and Eve made, all of God's new creation was cursed. And every single person who has been alive since then has sinned against God. There are no humans that are naturally holy. This is why we have to have faith in Jesus in order to please God. However, even once we have accepted Christ, we still aren't perfect. Even if you're a Christian, and even if you have been one for 80 years, you still sin against God and others every single day. So, what does holiness look like from us? We can't be holy like God. We can't go and create a universe. We can't go and be perfect. So, how do we become holy? 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 14 says, "As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance." This is where holiness starts. Think about metal. If you take scrap metal, you can then melt it down and you get this liquid that you can pour into a mold. And when it comes out of the mold, it's going to look like a sword or maybe, I don't know, a pair of scissors or a chair or something, but it's not going to look like scrap metal anymore. And it's not even going to be the liquid. It's going to be a final, different product. That's conformity. Before you trusted in Jesus, you were in this mold of lying, gossip, swearing, whatever you might have struggled with. It's the world's mold. But God has given you an opportunity to be poured into another mold, a mold that is shaped like Jesus Christ. Instead, we often choose to go back to looking like what we did before. But being holy like God is holy means that your life is going to be poured into the mold of Christ-likeness. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." We are made holy by renewing our minds. But how do we do that? Romans 12:1 tells us, "I appeal to you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your spiritual worship." Some translations of the Bible say, "which is your reasonable service." The phrase in this verse, living sacrifice, is very unique. Sacrifice is a very common thing to be talked about, especially in a religious context. But animal sacrifices, for instance, a sheep, if it were being sacrificed, it doesn't really even know what's going on, and it's going to die. A living sacrifice doesn't die. It stays alive. And this verse says, present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God. So we are supposed to willingly give up things that we want to do and conform them to God's will. This is our spiritual worship or our reasonable service as a servant of God. God calls us to be holy, so we need to give our whole lives to him as a living sacrifice, renewing our minds and be transformed to follow his will. That is how we can be holy as well. Holiness comes only through submission to God. It doesn't match our desires. It doesn't always follow our plan. It's revolutionary and it's very countercultural. But it's what God commands. Are you willing to be a sacrifice? To completely renew your mind? Are you every day asking God to help you be holy? Let me just read from 1 Peter again. Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, "You shall be holy, for I am holy."